remember you can open up Photoshop in a couple ways. Sometimes it's down here in your dock. You guys have a little shortcut. It looks like a kind of like a tote box with almost like an L shape in it. That is a shortcut to your applications folder. Unfortunately, I do not have that, so I'm going to go in here and go to Adobe Photoshop and double click it. So it'll take a second to load and then we'll get started. So again, these are just some of the basics of text. There are ways to make text look 3D, text look like a stamp. So there's a variety of things that you can do to make your text look interesting, but we're going to start slowly and then build and learn new things. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open all these files in Photoshop. So again, if you know something about one software, like you know how to open files in Microsoft Word, you know how to open files in Photoshop. The hotkey is Command O, or you can just go up to File, Open, and you can select multiple files. Now for you, you're going to go to your desktop generally and grab it, but mine will be in several subfolders within my jump drive because I keep things pretty organized. So I'm going to go to my folder. Like you can do reflected text. There's a lot of cool things you can do with text. So see if I can get all these at once. I need these files and these files. So to select multiple files, if you want to select multiple files and they're not in the same order, it's the same way you can select multiple files in Microsoft Office. If I hold the Command key down and then click, I can click on multiple items and open them all at one time. So the files that we want to open up first, we're just going to open all four. We're going to do the Bulldog, the football field, Darth Vader's mask, and the Keep Calm template. So then I can just hit open and I'll open all my files. And the nice thing is that you have these little tabs. And although there's 4 files, I'm only seeing about 3. You'll notice that if you look up here, you'll see that there's a double-sided arrow, and this, if you click on it, will show you the rest of the files that you can't see within the tabs. Or how could I see the rest of the files? I can drag my window bigger, and then I can see all the little files that I need. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start out with the football field and the Bulldog head. And again, if you have any questions or you had a problem getting your files open, please let me know before you get behind 1 or 2 steps, because then it takes a little while to get you caught up. But remember, it's perfectly all right to ask questions. All right, so like we talked about yesterday, sometimes your fingers hit keys on the keyboard that you didn't even know you really hit. But if I hit the Tab key, all my tools, all my palettes are going to disappear. But remember, if I look up top in the left and I see it says Photoshop, I know I'm in Photoshop, but it's kind of scary, right? You're moving everything around and you don't see anything. So if you hit the Tab key again, you'll notice your palettes and your tools and everything will come back. So again, if you ever hit the Tab key, just hit it again and it'll bring things back, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut out the Bulldog head, but we're actually going to resize this football field first because it's quite large. So resizing is just, again, adjusting the size. Is it a 5x7? Is it an 8x10? You can make it whatever you want. You go 3.25 by 7.15. It's whatever you want. However, since it already has proportions, it's a horizontal image. If we adjust one size, the other size is going to adjust for you to compensate and make sure we don't distort things. If you do not adjust the size proportionately or constrain the proportions, it'll be kind of like if you ever went to a circus and you looked in that mirror and it makes everything look kind of weird and stretched out and odd. So that's why we're going to adjust it proportionately. So let's click on your football one. And again, you do have tabs. So if you don't see that tab, you can actually go to the double-sided arrow. So I have the double-sided arrow. I can click on this double-sided arrow, find where it says football field, click on it, and then I can see that image. So now let's go up to image because we're going to adjust something about the image. So we're going to go to image menu, image size, because this is going to allow us to adjust the image size of our item. How many of you would like it if I screenshot a couple of these things and put it in a Word document? Or do you prefer video? I'm just asking. I saw at least 2 hands, so I'll take a picture of it. Perfect. So we're going to go to image size. Now, most people will tend to want to adjust the image size up in the pixel dimension. But remember, pixels are those individual dots or pixels that make up your image. And a lot of people tend to want to adjust this because it's already highlighted blue. However, we want to adjust the document size. So we're going to go down here into this area that says document size. Now you'll see if you look off to the side, it does say inches, which is great. Makes it a little bit easier on us. And you'll notice it also has this lock. That actually looks like a chain. What that means is it's going to constrain the proportions. So if I adjust the width, it will adjust the height to make sure it still looks normal. If I adjust the height, it will adjust the width. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it a little bit smaller. We're going to go to, we'll go 8. So let's put 8 in your width. And you'll notice it will adjust the height for you. And we'll leave the resolution 72 because that's what resolution this image is. It's because it's from the web. I borrowed it. So once you adjust the 8 in the inches, we're going to go ahead and say OK. Now it does get a little bit smaller, but remember we talked about yesterday there's a couple ways to zoom in. One is like what you did in Microsoft Word. Bottom left there's a percentage. You can highlight that with your mouse and say 50%. Or my favorite way of zooming is the Command key, which is right by your space bar, and the plus. And every time I hit the plus, it zooms in. If I want to zoom out, I hold the Command key and I hit the minus, which is by the 0 key. So we're just going to make it a little bit bigger so it's a little bit easier for you to see what's going on. And in my class, silence usually means compliance. It means everybody's okay. So again, if you do have any problems, just ask me a question. All right, so now we're going to go back to the Bulldog head. And this would not look very attractive if we just took this Bulldog with that white background and pasted it on the football field, because it'd be a white square on top of the football field, and that's not very attractive. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some of our selection tools, like we talked about yesterday. They're up here in the top part of your tool palette. These are your selection tools. And I gave you one that's very easy, because it's a similar color all the way around. If you have a gradation of color, or you have like the sky and grass and a road, it's more difficult to select the item. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the magic wand. It looks kind of like a little fairy wand Tinkerbell would use. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 down, or you can press the letter W for wand. But what you'll see is that looks actually like a paintbrush with dotted circles around it. How do I reveal the tools behind this tool? We talked about it yesterday. Click on this little tiny arrow on the bottom corner, or click and hold on the icon, and then you'll see it says magic wand. It looks like a little fairy wand. Okay? So let's get that little tiny fairy wand. Then we're just going to click once on the white background, because it's important for you to think smarter, not harder. What is going to be easier for me to select? If the wand only selects like colors, if I wanted to select the Bulldog, I could select the gray, the maroon, the gray, the white, all the tiny little maroons, and that would take a long time. So that would be like going like this, holding the shift key, adding this down, adding this, adding this, adding this, adding this. And that takes a lot of time. But if it's easier to select the background with one click, then we can actually go up to one of the menus and change the selection. So if we want to change the selection, or what we have selected, what menu do you think we would go to? Edit would be, it seems like that would be pretty logical. Unfortunately, not quite. Select. So we're going to go select inverse. There is a hotkey for it. It's actually Shift Command I, but we'll just go up to select inverse. Take a little picture. And then we're going to select the inverse. So it made our life a lot easier. So whenever you want to cut something out of a background, be it for your business card or a later assignment, think about what kind of tools you want to use. And I'm just showing you the magic wand because this is the easiest one with a solid color. But later I'll show you how to cut out other things from other backgrounds using other tools. So now we've cut that out. What's the hotkey in Microsoft Office to copy something? Yeah, Command C or Apple C. It used to have an Apple. They used to call it Open Apple, but now it's Command C, which is by your keyboard or your spacebar. So I'm going to hold the Command key and I'm going to hit C. And when you do that, you'll notice that the edit menu actually gets blue for a second, meaning that you've copied it. So then we're going to click on the football tab, and then we're going to paste this image on the, the football tab. So how do I paste? What's the hotkey for paste? Command V. You can also go up to Edit, Paste, just like you can in Microsoft Office. So I'm going to paste it. And now I have a bulldog on the football field. Now since I don't need the bulldog head any longer, I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to click on the X. You'll notice on some of these keyboards, some of the keys stick a little bit, so you might have to hit Command hard, or you can just go up to Edit Copy to get rid of that. Now, if we have this bulldog head very large, it's going to be difficult for us to put any text around it, so I can teach you the text. So what we're going to do is we are going to resize this bulldog head. And we want to do it proportionately. One, because we don't want to make somebody skinnier or chubbier or taller or shorter. Also, because are you aware that Mississippi State, when you utilize different logos, one, you have to ask for permission. Two, some of them have to be a certain size, and they can only appear on certain colors. So if you ever do anything with Mississippi State's logos, generally you have to ask permission, and you're going to have to look at the restrictions that they have, because they won't allow like certain logos to be on certain colors. Like when I did an advertisement for Pete Smith when he won an award, I had to have the MSU crest a certain size. It could not be smaller than a certain size, but it could be up to a certain size in height and width. So these are things that you have to be aware of, especially as people who are going to be doing designs when you use stuff with universities. With the move arrow, you'll notice that when you move your tool over to the side, it turns into a black arrow. But since I have the wand selected, when I move over the image, you'll see it turns to a wand. In order to move any item in Photoshop in your document, so like anything in the football field, I would have to use my move or selection arrow, which is your top arrow, or you can hit the letter V, as in very close to the weekend. And then you can see now I have the arrow up top, and now I can move this bulldog head wherever I want him to be. So again, if you want to move any item, text, a colored box, a photo, a graphic, if you want to move anything in Photoshop, you have to have this top arrow selected, which is your move arrow. And you can press the letter V to get to that tool. Now the thing that we're going to do before we actually resize it is we're going to try to keep our stuff organized. When I design graphics for television, sometimes I have over 40 layers. Sometimes there might be tiny little items on one layer, big items on another, and it can be very difficult to keep things organized unless you label them. So what we're going to do is we're going to label our layers. Now mine is in the design mode. So let's go ahead, if you haven't clicked on design, up here under your menus, like we did yesterday, let's click on the design, because it's going to show you your character palette, and we're going to be using text, so it makes it a little bit easier for you to do the character palette. So after we click on the design, we're going to go down here, and you'll see some of you might have your layers open, or some of yours might look like mine, where you see the layers tab but you don't see any information. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on that layers tab, and it just pushes the character palette up. It didn't disappear, it's just still there. You can always go back and click on character and it goes there. So let's click on layers, and now you're going to see your different layers. And it's kind of like what we looked at yesterday when I made those colored boxes. Layers are kind of like, if you think about it, like layers on a bed. If you have a sheet and then you have a comforter over the sheet, you're not going to see what the sheet looks like, you're only going to see the comforter. But if you put pillows on top of your comforter, then you're going to see the pillows and the comforter. And so that's why now you can see the bulldog and the field, because the bulldog is smaller than the field. So what we're going to do is we're going to label your layers. And this is worth points, and it will make your life easier. Yes, it's easy to see the bulldog, but sometimes when you get into designs, you have tiny little things, and it can be difficult. So what we're going to do is if you go over to your layer, you can tell what layer you have selected because it's highlighted blue. So what we're going to do is we're going to click where it says layer 1. So click on the text where it says layer 1, and then it'll highlight it blue, and you can say bulldog. That way it keeps things a little bit organized for you. So again, what I did is I went to design, and my character palette was like this. So then I click on layers. So by clicking on layers, it reveals all my layers. Then I'm going to go click, click on the text, click, click, and then I can highlight it and call it Bulldog. And then now you've relabeled your layer. So whenever you label it, just make sure it's something logical that you can tell what it is. So I'm going to go to background, and instead of background, it's going to not let me change it because it's a background and it's a locked layer. So background, obviously that's our background layer. So now we're going to resize the Bulldog. Okay, so what we're going to do is we need to make sure we have that move arrow selected, because we're actually going to move him around after we are done resizing him. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go, and I'm going to show you the hotkey, and I'm going to show you where it is in the menu. Okay, I love hotkeys. Command T, as in transform, will put what we call a box or a binding box around your Bulldog. So we need to make sure we're on the Bulldog layer. I'm going to hit Command T. Now you'll notice this box appears. So if you can take a second and look at the projector, I'm going to show you what this box does. The box, and this is one way some people cheat in Photoshop. It's a very ghetto way to make yourself skinnier. You can just pull a little bit inward, and it makes people just a little bit skinnier. But we don't want to make bullies skinnier, because we have to adhere to the rules for Mississippi State's logo and stuff. So if I go to the corner, you'll see it turns to a double-sided arrow, and I can hold the Shift key and pull inward, and it adjusts it proportionately. Bully doesn't get taller, Bully doesn't get fatter, he just gets smaller. But like I showed you, if you pull from the sides, you can make him look taller, skinnier, shorter, weirder. Now sometimes with text I'll do this because it makes my text fill the space I want. However, that's not good for the Bulldog. The other way you can transform the Bulldog is without the hotkey. You can go to a menu. This is where you would go to Edit, Transform, or Edit Free Transform. So you would go Edit Free Transform. And you can see the hotkey is next to it too, like I said, the Command T. So either way is going to be acceptable. It's just whatever way you want to utilize. Alright, so now that we have this box around, and we're going to move our arrow to the corner, any corner, top, bottom, left or right, does not matter. And I'm going to hold the Shift key, and I'm going to pull inwards, and I'm going to make the Bulldog a little smaller, because we're going to put text around him. So let's make the Bulldog smaller. So remember, holding the Shift key, you have to do it where you see the double-sided diagonal arrow. So move it to where it's over the square, and then hold the Shift key and pull inward. When you get the Bulldog about the size you want, if you hit the return key, it applies the transformation. Now you'll notice if I have this, if you look up here, if I have this transform box here, and I haven't done the transformation and applied it, if I try to use another tool, Photoshop is going to prompt you and say, are you sure you want to transform this? Apply or don't apply. Because you have to finish and apply the transformation before it will let you do anything else. So I'm going to say apply. And then if I want to move it, I have to have this move selection arrow, and we can move them and put them over the 40-yard line. Which center alignment is weak, but we'll just put them there for right now. So remember, if you have questions, let me know. But remember, if you ever want to move anything, you got to move it with that move arrow. Am I going too fast, or I feel like I'm going really slow, but if I'm going too fast or too slow, let me know. Alrighty, so we are going to function with some text right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to the character palette. Now, Photoshop is very nice. It does allow us to see what the fonts look like when you move through the font characters. Some programs do not. It's either Illustrator or InDesign, you do not get to see what the font looks like. But Photoshop is nice. It allows you to go through and find fonts and see what they look like. So let's look for an interesting font with some weight to it, not like a very scripty, tiny, thin font. Let's look for something that's a little bold. It doesn't have to be super huge, like Impact or Hobo, but something that's a little bit, has some weight to it. So nothing like a really frilly scripted font, no old English. Let's give it something with a little bit of weight. Oh yeah, I keep forgetting this is not my computer, because I was like, there are not a lot of fonts. So I guess I will go and I'll use Rockwell Ultra Bold. You don't have to use that font, but that's the font I'm going to use. So in the character palette, this is where you're going to be able to adjust things about your text, because you don't always want to just use the standard text that it gives you. Now, for some reason, my color is yellow, which is pretty hideous. It's not going to look great with this design. What colors do you think could probably work well if you were designing something with this background and this Bulldog? Gray. Okay, a light gray. Any other ideas? Multiple colors would work, not just one. A white. Okay. Black. Or maroon. Hot pink is going to clash. Okay, so these are things you have to think about. So if you look in your character palette, you'll see that my color is yellow. If I click on this box, if you ever see a box of color and you click on it, it's going to allow you to change it. Now, if you look in this color selector up here, you can actually adjust the slider bar to different portions of this rainbow on the right. And then I can just click with the circle, and that's going to show me what my new color is versus what the current color I have is. So I could go all the way down and say, yes, I want black, and say, okay. Or if I want to pull a color from the image, I can use the eyedropper. So let's select your eyedropper. It looks just like a regular eyedropper. You can press the letter I for eyedropper and select either the gray or the maroon. I do not care which color, but you're going to select that color. And you can see when you click and hold, or you click with the eyedropper, it has a circle appear that shows you what the color is. Gray, burgundy. Maroon. Oh my gosh. I'm tired. Maroon, maroon, maroon. It's maroon. So I'm going to use the maroon, and you'll see the color changes in my box. Now, a couple things I want to talk to you about this character palette over here. You can manipulate your text in a variety of ways. So I'm going to show you all of these ways, and then I'm going to only have you utilize a couple of them. So if I'm going to use text, like we talked about yesterday, you're going to have to use the text tool. Just like the other tools, you notice that the text tool also has an arrow behind it, or on the bottom corner. If I click and hold, I can do horizontal type, I can do vertical type, I can do a horizontal or a vertical mask. What the horizontal and vertical mask does is it actually takes the colors from whatever you are typing over and puts it in the image. So if you wanted flowers in your type, you would just start typing over an image of flowers, and it would pull that from the background and put it into your text. So we're going to actually start functioning with the horizontal type. And you'll notice when I type, if I type 2 lines, it automatically has a different space between those 2 lines. So what happens is if I go to my character palette, I can adjust things about my font. So I'm just going to show you these. So just watch right now, and then we'll do some text. So right now I have Boolean MSU. But me personally, I think these 2 lines are too far apart. So what I'll do is I'll highlight them, and I can go over here. This is what we talked about last time, leading. It's pronounced L-E-D-D-I-N-G, but it's spelled L-E-A-D-I-N-G. Leading. Now, if it's automatic, each font has an automatic leading that is based on the X height and the height of the letters. So if I go from auto, I can say, no, let's try making it 18. Well, 18, you can see it puts it on top of itself, so that's probably not a good idea. But if I wanted to, I could then change it from that to maybe, let's try 30. Now it's a little bit closer together, and I like that. I think it looks a little bit better than it did when it was further apart. Do you see the difference? Sometimes just using what is standard doesn't always work in your design. Or you can actually put both of these words in different text boxes and then move them around independently. The other things you can notice in the character palette, aside from leading, is what we call tracking. Tracking is this A, V, and the horizontal line. Tracking is the space between letters. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see this. So if I adjust my tracking, right now it's 0. Negative tracking means it brings things closer together. So you'll see that the letters kind of scrunched a little bit closer together, and they're really close together now. Versus if I go to 0, they're a little bit further apart. Or if I want to increase the space, I can go into the positive and say, let's increase the space between the letters. And it pushes the letters away from each other. So that's what that feature does. It's called tracking. The X and the Y, it's your height and your width. If I don't want to have this be standard, like say I want bully to be taller than the rest of it, I can say let's make this one letter 200% bigger. And now I have a bigger letter. Or if I want to make MSU and I want to make the M wider, I can say instead of doing 100%, which is normal, let's do 200%. And now I have a very wide M. So the height and the width can be adjusted on individual letters or on all the letters. So I'm going to put them back to 100% to make it normal. So 100% is normal for your height and your width. All right, so those are some of the basics. Now down here, it can actually bold something. You'll notice that some fonts in Photoshop do not have options of changing what kind of font it is. Like this font up here, you'll notice that all I can do is regular. I can't change it to bold or something else. But if I go to another font, let's check this one. This one has regular and italics, whereas some fonts don't have either option. So what I can do is I can go down here and I can do a fake bold. So this big bold T actually kind of does a fake bold or a faux bold. This one can kind of fake an italic. This one makes everything capital letters or undoes it. This one makes the first letter bigger and it's smaller capital letters. This does subscript. So these things can change it. I can underline it. I can cross through it. So these options down here allow you, if you don't have the option to bold or italicize things or make things in all capital letters and you don't want to retype it, those are what those options are for. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of text and make some minor adjustments. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select that text tool. So let's go ahead and get the text tool. You can press T for text, and it should come up with horizontal text. So what we're going to do is we're going to type, let's go with your name so I know whose this is. So we'll go first and last name. So Teresa Godrich. Remember, I want it in either the gray or the maroon. So again, to get to the text tool, it's over here on your left where your tool palette is. You just click on the tool and it selects it for you. And then to start typing, you just click anywhere on the image and it can start typing. Now, if I wanted to move this text around in this image, instead of putting it above bully, I wanted to put it below bully. How would I do that? I would use that move arrow. So I'd have that black arrow up top, and then I can actually click and move the text wherever I want it to go. So remember, if you want to move anything in Photoshop, you have to have that move arrow. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we are going to add some effects to this, because this text isn't necessarily popping off the page very well. You can add effects in a couple different ways. I personally like to go and add my effects down on my layers palette. So now let's go back and let's click on our layers. You guys have a bigger screen than I do, that's why you probably can see everything and I can't. But you'll notice with text, text creates its own layer. So anytime you click with the text tool, you'll have a layer and it'll have a T on it. And that T stands for text. It indicates that you have a text layer. And whatever you have typed out will be the name of that layer. So you can see a T and then it should say your name in the layer. So what I want to do is I'm going to add an effect. You can use a menu up top, but I like to use the layers palette. You can click on FX down here and pick it. Or the way I like is if you click in the empty blue area, if you click, so if you double click, you can open up this window. And I like it because I can see what all the items look like. So again, to get to there, you're going to click, if you don't see your layers palette, you're going to click on layers. You're going to double click in this empty blue area. And now I have these options of adding different effects to my font. Now I can't see my font right now, so if I click on where it says layer styles, you can move the window, just like you can move a window in Microsoft Office or other programs. Okay, so now you'll notice on the side you have these options with boxes, and if you click on the box and add a check mark to it, then you can see it adds something to it. So this adds a drop shadow, this adds an outer glow. Now the nice thing is Photoshop gives you the ability to change those things. So if you want to change something, like say I have an outer glow, so to add the outer glow I just click on that box and it adds the blue check mark. But if I want to change the outer glow, maybe I want the outer glow instead of being yellow to be gray. If you want to change any of these styles, all you have to do is click on the word and it highlights it blue, and then you'll notice that inside the middle it changes what your options are. So I can change it from yellow to gray. Now, how did I say we can change colors? What do you need to click on in order to change a color? You can use the eyedropper, but you have to click on the little square of the color box, and then I can move this window down and I can say let's use gray. And so now I have a gray. And you see how it ties it back to the design a little bit more than the yellow? So what I want you to do is I'm going to give you some time to kind of click around and look at the layer styles and see what they do. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to do that. But again, if I want to change the drop shadow from dark to another color, I click on the word drop shadow. I can click on the black box. I can say no, let's make it a gray drop shadow, or I can go blue, which doesn't really work with the design. So if you add something, make sure that it works well. Like if you have a dark font, what do you think your glow or your drop shadow might want to be? Light or dark? Light. And remember, like we talked about yesterday, that's one way to add the C in the word crap, the contrast. So you can add contrast with the dark and the light. So that's one way you can add some contrast. So I'm going to let you click around and play and see what some of these do. Like bevel and emboss kind of curves it and contours it and adds a little bit of a shimmer to it. And you can change how much it is beveled and embossed. A little bit, a lot, not a lot, by adjusting the sliders. So I'm going to give you a couple seconds or a minute or two to play around with that. Color overlay just obviously changes the color. You can add patterns, and then I can adjust the pattern and say instead of being a normal pattern, I'm going to adjust it and make it lighter. But the pattern kind of makes it difficult to read. You can add gradients. You can add a stroke to it. The ones that I tend to utilize when it comes to effects are drop shadow, inner shadow, outer glow, inner glow, or stroke. Sometimes I might use the bevel and emboss, but not all the time. So you can see if I click on stroke, I can adjust the size and make it really large, which is kind of ugly. Or I can say, no, let's just make it really thin, so that way it kind of helps it pop off the page a little bit, but doesn't look, childlike. Again, dark with dark, difficult to read. So I can click on the box and I can say, no, let's go with the light gray. And that's a little bit easier to read, the light with the dark. So the one that I want us to use is we are going to use a glow. So we're going to use an outer glow, because the inner glow kind of changes the color of the font. So click off if you added any of these when you were looking around at what they did. Let's just click them off and they'll disappear. So let's click on outer glow, and then let's click on the word outer glow, and let's change it to that light gray from the Bulldog. So if you did light gray text, click on the maroon for the outer glow. If you did maroon text, click on the light gray for the outer glow. So again, to change color, if you ever have a color box, you can click on the box and it's going to open up your color picker. Now if you move the color picker window and you move the layer style window, you can then see the Bulldog. So again, you can just click on the color picker or the layer style top, and then when you move over the icon, you can select green, you can select the gray. So if you have maroon text, select the light gray to do that for your outer glow. If you have light gray text, select the opposite. And then once you select it, you can press OK on your color. So remember, if you have questions, just blurt them out. I mean, no big deal, because if you don't ask questions, then I just keep going. So remember, to get to that layer style and to adjust the options, you have to click on the word, then it highlights it blue. Now, if I want to, I can actually increase how much of a glow there is. You'll notice it says spread and size. If I increase the size, you can see the glow gets a little bigger. So let's increase the glow a little bit. Man, I'm tired. So again, you can adjust the slider bar to increase the size. I don't want it so huge that it disappears. I want you to still be able to kind of see it. So around the 15 to 20 some range. I'll do 13. So it just makes it a little bit bigger. And again, you can do that by adjusting the slider bar or just typing in a number over here. So I could type 15, and then it's 15. And then let's press OK. The thing is, when you do layer styles, why do you think you don't want to add like 3 or 4 layer, effects to text? It looks like too much. It looks like you're trying to throw everything into one part of your design. And if I add an outer glow to all my text, what are some pros or cons to that? It can look bunched together sometimes. Maybe your glows start to like even touch together. If everything glows, what text is going to stand out? So you have to think about that. Remember the contrast that we talked about yesterday. If all the text has effects on it and they're the same effect, then you have to find some other way to make one of the words or part of the word stand out. So if all of your text had the effect outer glow on it, what are some ways that you could make one portion of your text stand out more than the other? Get some of that contrast in there. Different colors. What else could you change? Change the font. Good idea. Yes, it's like you were reading my mind. The size. So font, size, you can bold it, you can italicize some of the font. So you just have to find some way to add some contrast to it to make it stand out. So you have to be careful, you don't want to add too many effects. So now I'm going to show you how to do vertical text. I honestly hardly ever use vertical text, but I want you to be aware that it's there and how to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our text tool. And remember, when we use the text tool, if we click, as long as we don't click near or on the text that we already created, it will create a new layer. So to get to that the vertical text, we're going to click and hold on that tool, and we're going to go down to where it says vertical type tool. All right? And then now you'll notice that your cursor goes the other way. If you're typing horizontally, your cursor looks like normal, like you would see it in Microsoft Word, but you can see up here it's going the opposite direction. So if I click, then we can type something else. So give me at least 2 words that will fit on this page. There you go. You can do Hail State. So what happened, she had an error happen, and it's great because we can learn from that, because I guarantee you somebody else might accidentally do that in the future. So say I want to pull flowers and have flowers in my text. So if you can look up here, I'm going to show you because this might accidentally happen to you. So say you're going and you want to do the vertical type. Well, she accidentally did vertical type mask, and then the whole screen goes red. Let me get it. Okay, that's a good one. And if you click on it, then everything goes red, and I can type the word flowers. And then if I hit the arrow key, now you can see that when I copy this and I paste it to my field, now my text is flowers. So that's what the type mask does, is it pulls from whatever image you are clicking on. So it could be flowers, it could be the ocean, it could be pebbles, you name it, it could be that. So we'll do that in a little bit. So with the Hail State, my Hail State went off the page. How do I fix that? The arrow key and move it. All right, so let's move it so where you can see it. Now, is this a beautiful design? No, this design is horrid, okay? The balance is off, it's horrible, it's bad. Don't design like this. We're just doing this to try to teach you how to use the tools. And then after you get a little bit comfortable with these tools, we're actually going to do a tutorial with a business card and actually work on placing elements in a beautiful, nicely balanced way. So now we have the Hail State. I'm going to let you pick whatever effect you want to add to this. The only thing I am going to tell you is make sure it looks good and it is legible. Okay? So if you want to add a drop shadow, if you want to add a stroke, if you want to add an inner glow, that's fine. So again, the way you can do that is you can double click in the blue empty area of the Hail State, or you can go down here to the effects if you know what you want to add. I can say, oh, I know I want to add a stroke. Then it'll open up that window anyway. But I can then add a stroke around it if I want. So if I want to manipulate any of these items, I can click on the word, and then I can adjust the color. And then I can adjust the size if I want. So there are a lot of options, and these things that I'm teaching you are the absolute basics. Like I said, we can do reflected text. We can do text that looks like a stamp. There's a lot of things and ways you can manipulate and create text in Photoshop. These are just the most basic ways that you can utilize text within this program. Front of the H and make it bigger and the state bigger, which is a great idea. Because right now, the Hail State kind of flows together, right? It almost looks like it's one word. So by adding that contrast, which was a great idea, we can then make the words look like they're two separate words. So if you look up here, I'll show you, if you want to select this box, or excuse me, this font, you'll notice if you move away from the H, if you look up here, you'll see there's a box around it. It looks like this. You can barely see it. But if I move to the H, the box disappears. If the box disappears, it means that I will now be selecting this H. And then I can go to my character, and I can say instead of 100%, let's do 200. And then instead of that, I'll probably go to 150 because it's a little, 150. And then I can then go down to the S and say, let's make this 150, which was a great idea. Nobody's ever done that before, so that was a really neat idea to add some contrast. And now I have a hail and a state, and it looks a little bit more like they're different words. But you can see I personally really do not like the vertical text. I think it flows all together. Some people like it. I'm just not a big fan of it. We're going to actually do that horizontal type mask. So if you saw me do it once and you're good to go and you want to do it on your own, you're fine. I'm going to let people have another minute or two to make their adjustments, and then I'm going to pull a image. Trying to think of something with good textures. I saw yours with, did you type in like cosmic sky or what? Space. Yeah, that space one came out pretty awesome. So you can copy it. So if you have the image from the internet, there's a couple ways to get it into Photoshop. You can drag it from the internet like you did in Microsoft, or excuse me, like when you were on My State and opened it up in Photoshop in the beginning. Or I can hold the control key and click copy image. Then if I go into Photoshop, I'm going to make a new document because I don't want to paste it on top of my Bulldog. So I'm going to just go up to File New or hit Command N, and you can just say OK, because if you copy an image and then you paste the image, Photoshop will always make it the size of the image that you copied. So now you can see it fits perfectly in there. So I'll do that again. Don't save. All right, so I went to the internet and I did traditional tattoos. So now what I'm going to do is I can either drag and drop it to the desktop and then just go File Open, or right click on it and say Open with Photoshop, Rainbow Wheel of Death. So I can right click, which is Control, click with the mouse, and I can say Open with Photoshop, and then it will open my image. The other way you can go about doing it, again, is if you're on the internet, you can hold the Control key. Now, yes, there are right-clickable mice. Ours just are not. So I can hold the Control key, which does the right-click with these mice, and I can say Copy Image. Then I can go to Photoshop and say Command N or File New, hit Return, and then paste it, Command V. Either way works. Drag and drop to the desktop, File Open. Whatever way you want to go about it is completely fine. But let's just open some kind of texture or pattern. It could be a chevron pattern, a paisley pattern. It could be tattoos. It could be flowers. soccer balls, footballs. What else am I seeing? Other things I can't see. The space one looks awesome. That looks like that might turn out pretty cool. Now, what are some things you might think we have to think about when selecting the font that we're going to use to have the horizontal type mask? Do you think we're going to see a lot of stuff if we use a scripted font? Scripted fonts look like handwriting fonts. No, because they're not going to be big and bold. So if you're ever going to use a type mask where you're going to pull images or textures or patterns into that text, it has to be a wide or a font with some weight, a little bit of a bold font. So I'm going to select my horizontal type mask. So remember, if you get lost, I'm just going to leave it up here for a second. You just click and hold on the text tool, and you're going to arrow down to horizontal type mask. Let's take a picture. Horizontal type mask. Now when you click with it, it is going to turn red, but wherever you click, that's what it's going to start selecting. So I'm going to make sure I have a bold font, which I do. I'm going to make mine a little bigger, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to say Teresa G. So you can just type a word out, and we're just going to use it to pull from there. Now, if you don't like it, you can always hit the delete key and restart typing. You're like, oh, I misspelled it, or I want to type a different word. But then if you want to see what you grabbed, you're going to click on your move arrow, and that's going to outline those little marching ants are like showing you this is where you're pulling the images from. Then I can copy it, and then I can go back to my football and I can paste it. So I'm going to show you how to do that again. So you have your image in Photoshop. Woohoo. So what you're going to do is once you have the image in Photoshop, you're going to want to make sure you do have a bold font. So I used Rockwell Ultra Bold because it's big and bold. I upped my font size to about a 48 because then I figured I could see more of my font. Okay. Then all I'm going to do is click around where I want it to be, and it's going to start typing here and move that way. So there's not quite a lot of textures and patterns right there. I might start here to see if I can, well, no, then I'll go right here. So I'm going to click, and I'm going to start typing Teresa G. And then to make it to where I can see what I have selected, I can hit the move arrow. And remember, whenever you see marching ants, that means that whatever is within the marching ants is what's selected. So I can then click, hold, and drag and drop, or I can copy it. So I'm going to go up to Edit, Copy, and it's going to copy what is within those marching ants. Then I'm going to go and find my football, and I'm going to paste it. Edit, Paste. And now I have my name with tattoos in it. Now, is that easy to read? Is that legible? No. What could I do to make it legible if I wanted to keep those textures and patterns in the font? What are some things that you think we could add to that font that I have up there? Shadow, stroke, maybe a glow. So I'm going to then go to my layer, and I'm going to click on it, double click on it, and I'm going to try adding, I can add a shadow, and see it pops off the page a little bit. I can try to do an outer glow, but since I have light and light, I'd probably change the outer glow. I can add a stroke, and then it's a little bit easier to see. Maybe change the color of the stroke. I can change the color to maybe the red in the, or maybe the blue. The blue looks a little better. So you can change the shadow. All you have to do is double click in the empty area on that layer. So like here on layer 1, I just double click and it opens it up. So you can go up to File, Save As, and then we're going to save it with your first initial, last name, text 1. So you're going to save it as your first initial, last name, text 1, and it's going to come up as a .psd. What that means is that's the format or file extension. Kind of like you see the file extension when you're using Microsoft Word. It's now a .docx, saying it's a Microsoft Word document. PSD stands for Photoshop document. It just means that you're making an item in Photoshop that has multiple layers, which is perfect. That's what I want. So we're going to save it as your first initial, last name, text 1, and then just say save. It's going to ask you to maximize compatibility. Just say OK, just so that way you have everything in case. So again, you can see that this balance is all crazy and cattywampus. It doesn't look good, but this is just to teach you some of the basics of text. And like I said, I know it might not seem basic, but this is basic. So one thing I do want you to do, those of you who are already done adding your effects to your type mask, is you'll notice that when you do the type mask, when you paste it in, it comes in without a name on it. So I want you to relabel that layer as something that we know. So I could call mine T tattoo or T tats, and I know it's the text with the tats on it. So call it something that you will know what it is. So again, you can click on your layers palette, click on the name of the layer you want to change, and I can call it Teresa G because that's the only one that says Teresa G, and I know that is the Teresa G layer. It will make your life so much easier when you start designing bigger things with tons of layers and tiny things on it and similar items. It just makes your life easier. Like sometimes I'll call it right circle, red circle, top right something. So just make sure you label your layer after you're done adding the effect to the text, and then save it again. So if you just want to resave over something that you've already saved the name as, you don't always have to go up and say File Save As. You can just hit Command S as in save, or File Save, and it'll save over the file that you already have, but leave it with the same name. So not too terribly difficult. Once you kind of get playing around in Photoshop, there's quite a bit of things you can do. Now there's one last thing we're going to do before I have you save this, and we'll move on to the Darth Vader. Does anyone still need time to finish their type mask? Alright, so the other thing we have is we have text warps. We can warp our text. So if you can take a second and look up here, I'm going to show you a few things with a text warp. Now remember, this is not a text warp, but this is to show you. Remember, we can resize the Bulldog head, right? Well, if I click on my text layer with Teresa G, or Teresa Govrich, which is this one up top, if I hit Command T, say I ever wanted it taller, I could just pull it up and make it taller. I could stretch it to fill the space. So remember, Command T can be used to resize things and make it a little bit bigger, fill the space, make it taller, and that's fine with text. You just don't want to do that with people because it can distort us. But that is just to show you that Command T allows you to transform the text if you need it to fill a certain space, and so it can make it like 11.25 on the font. So it allows you to manipulate the font. Now to do a text warp, what I have to do is I have to select my regular horizontal type tool. And I'll do this again. You'll notice I'm going to select my Teresa Govrich. I just move the cursor to it, click, and it highlights all of it. Now if you look up here in your options bar, remember when you have any tool selected, the option bar is going to give you options how to change it. I can change the alignment. I can change the font size. But I can also add what we call a text warp. If you see there's a T with a curve underneath it, this allows me to warp the text. Right now it says style none. But if you look, I can change it. I can arc my text. And then I can say, no, let's bend it a little bit smaller. So say maybe I want to bend it around the bully logo. I can horizontally distort it, make it look like it's going from smaller to larger. I can do the opposite with the vertical. I can go and I can do a lower arc or an upper arc. So it allows you to warp your text in different ways. Or say you're doing something for a church. You can even turn it into a fish. I can manipulate it and make it into a fish shape. So I'm going to do that again because I want you to warp the text. Yes. Okay, if your toolbar disappears, did everything else disappear too? No, just the toolbar. If anything disappears, like your toolbar, your character palette, and you can't see it, you can go up to Window, and then you can go down to the bottom and you can select Tools. Or if you lose your character palette, you can go Window, Character, and it'll bring up your character. So if you ever lose a window and it's not because you accidentally hit that Tab key, because I had my text selected, I made it disappear. If you hit the Tab key, everything disappears. But if you only had like the toolbar disappear, you can go up to Window and then you can go down and you can say Tools and it'll bring your toolbar back. All right, so again, we're gonna warp the text that you added the effect to with the 2 words. So where it says Teresa Govrich, find the text that you did for that, and let's select that layer in the Layers palette. Now what we're gonna do is we have to go get the regular horizontal type tool. So I'm gonna go over to the type tool, or text tool, and I'm going to hit horizontal type. Now remember, if I move my cursor away from the font, it'll select different fonts. You see here it's going vertical to select that. I'm going to move my cursor towards the Teresa Govrich, click, 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 and it's going to highlight all of my text. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the text warp, which is the T with the curve underneath it, and I want you to apply a warp to it. Make sure it's still legible. You can use the arc. You can manipulate the arc and make it a little bit bend less. You can go and do the rise where it kind of looks like it's rising. I can distort it and make it look like it's rising more or less. So I want you to apply a warp that you want. I don't care which one it is. All I care is that it is legible. I can still read it after you apply the manipulation. And I encourage you to try manipulating the bend. Make it have more of a bend and it's rising more. If you go, I'll show you again. So if you look up here, I'll show you. So we got the text tool, and let's move and make sure we're on the layer. The first thing we want to do is make sure you're on the layer of the text you want to grab. Then we're going to move the horizontal text tool to that, click, 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 and we highlight the text, right? Now since we have the character, bless you. Now that we have the text tool selected, I can go down to the end where it has the T with the horizontal warp, or that line, and click on it, and then this brings up the warp. And then you can pick through here. So it's right up here, this little guy right here. And then I'm going to save it. After I make like a few changes, I just hit Command S. You never know when these computers are going to crash. You never know when your cat or your computer neighbor is going to unplug your computer or turn off your surge protector. You never know when something's going to happen. So it's always great to save it. Does anybody need me to repeat the text warp? I don't mind repeating it. I just need to know if you want me to do it again. Here to help. If you're done, then let's hit Command S.